Hello, everybody, and welcome to my open home. I'm Lisa Stafford, and I'm a property advocate. And tonight, I want to speak to you about this FOMO turning into FOOP. So let me explain a little bit about what these acronyms are. So FOMO, fear of missing out, and this is what we've just experienced in the property market over the last couple of years. We've seen buyers lining up for properties to try to get in to inspect them because there's been crowd limits and, only a certain number of people can actually inspect a property at once. So this is kind of like a bit of social proof justification, if you like, where, that feeling when you want something and then you see other people that want it as well, and it makes you want it more. It's a very powerful emotion, and that's what this fear of missing out has really injected into buyers in the marketplace. And this has created competition beyond comprehension. And we've seen, properties that have been exceeding the advertised price range by hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars without any real, justification on how that could even happen. And put into the mix, all these emotions, and it's a crazy experience to have to go through when you're a buyer. And I know this firsthand because I buy and sell properties for my clients every single week. And to give you an example, I had a client, and it was 2 months ago, and we found a property that they thought was their dream home, and it was in Blackrock. And, it was a lovely 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home on a good sized block of about 500 square metres, a bit more than that. It was advertised for $1,850,000 to $2,020,000. And my clients had a pretty good budget, and their budget was above the advertised price range. And we went to that auction, and there was quite a few people there, as there normally is on a Saturday in Melbourne. And, the bidding started, and it kept going and kept going. It passed where we were prepared to pay, and it ended up selling for over $300,000 more than the advertised price range. So as you can appreciate, my clients were devastated, and that fear of missing out became a real thing. They really felt like they had missed out on their dream. There were tears, there were emotions, and they really felt like they'd missed the opportunity to buy a home. And this was like a ripple effect throughout the whole of Melbourne. All these buyers were talking about, and the more that was happening, the more people were stretching beyond their limits to be able to buy property. And what we've seen over the last few months, we've obviously seen the interest rate increases, we've seen changing government, we've seen, some world events that have had some impacts on us, and, new ways of COVID and, new variants and all this sort of thing. And then the media jumps on board and starts to talk about all this doom and gloom and how property prices are going to crash, or they're going to be impacted in a downward manner. And then we start to see clearance rates start to be lower. And, what we've been seeing is, around that sort of low to mid 60%, which, not that long ago, we were seeing 70, 80% clearance rates. So people read into this, and it's probably wrong, because a lot of people think that, if the clearance rate's only 60%, only 60% of properties are selling. When in actual fact, they're just not selling at auction, because what's happening is this change of attitude is what's happening, and this is where the FOOP comes in. It's a funny word, I know, but what it stands for is fear of overpaying. All right, so it's this idea that buyers think they might just sit back and wait and sit on the fence in some regards to just see what happens. So, at an auction, they might be a little bit more reserved to put their hand up and get involved. And, if all buyers are like that, then the property will pass in. But that's not to say that the property doesn't sell. It just doesn't sell under auction conditions, because people don't have the confidence to bid and buy in that sort of environment. So this is that fear of overpaying, and that's what we're seeing across the board, that uncertainty. But with that comes opportunities. And, with that client that I was telling you about, only last month, we found another property that was, ticked all the boxes. It was actually, I believe, it was in a better location. But look, it was quite comparable to the other one. It was advertised similarly because, you know, obviously that was within their budget. But the auction felt different, and call it instinct, what you will. But I was there and my client was standing next to me, and as the auction started, I turned to him and I whispered, I'm going to use a different tactic. And, you know, he was interested to see what I meant by that. But I could sense this vibe that there was just not the same vibe. There was not the same intent amongst, there were probably about 30 people, and it was quite an intimate auction, to be honest with you, because it was raining, so we were all inside. And it probably helped me to read the room a little bit better in that situation. But I just got the feeling, and I was right, because nobody actually bid. So I was standing there and I was just waiting, and the auctioneer was trying to extract bids. He knew we were there, like I'd been speaking with them leading up to the auction. But yeah, it got to the stage where he was going to pass the property in, and I put in a bid about 10,000 above the lowest advertised price range, to which the property was passed into us, which put us in the prime position. And to be honest with you, my clients were like looking at me with their mouths open. I had to shut them like this because they couldn't believe what had just happened. So we went into the room and we waited, and we got exclusive rights to negotiate with that vendor. And we purchased the property for $1,900,000. So, you know, this was just a classic example of an opportunity because of other people's uncertainty. So my clients were qualified. They were in a position to actually move and buy the home of their dreams. And, you know, we didn't have any competition, so it made it very, very easy. And, you know, there wasn't as much stress as there would have been if we were against other competition. So, yeah, and there's been a few of those stories, but, you know, I can only pick out one or two. But look, this is where that opportunity really arises. And if you can, I guess, if you're in a situation where you know what you want and you are ready and qualified, and, you know, you've got your budget, you know how much you can spend, you know, there's a little bit of that power shift has come back to a buyer's market. But in the same breath, I'd like to talk to you about the opportunities for sellers, okay? Because there's people out there that are thinking or in a position where they need to sell their property, and they might be feeling quite anxious and quite concerned about, you know, the media and all this information that's being talked about. So, you know, good properties that are presented and promoted properly will always do well, okay? And I guess, you know, part of the job that I do with my clients is I try to help them to present their house in a way that's going to create competition amongst buyers, okay? So it's that emotional connection that a buyer wants what you've got, and they are prepared to compete for it. So you just need to be able to tap into that emotion to be able to, you know, follow a process that's going to get you the result that you need. I think too, also for that, you need to have your price expectations need to be competitive with what else is on the market, and you need to, you know, be aware of that. Okay, so that comes down to having good advice and, you know, that experience on your side, so that you understand everything that is happening in the market and where your property sits. You know, you also you do need that process to follow, so that you've got that guidance, and you need to get an agent that you can trust is going to work with you, okay? Someone that's going to be able to explain things, somebody that's going to be able to negotiate with those buyers in any circumstance, all right? And for buyers, the opportunities are there, so long as you have the right data and the right knowledge to know what the property prices are, and, you know, what's a good price, or what's the right price to pay for the right type of property. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence and that you know exactly what it is that you're committing to. Understand what you can afford. And you know what? There's so many different ways and there's so many different tactics that you can use to negotiate. And this comes down to, you know, bidding at auction, bidding at a private sales situation. You know, some agents call it sale by set date, expressions of interest. There's so many different, I guess, formats of negotiating, but you need to understand how each agent, you know, what their process is for taking those offers if it's not an auction situation, because they all do it differently. And you know what, you can also use an expert buyer's agent to make sure that you get it right. So, like, you know what, don't wait for something that hasn't happened yet, you know, is probably the best advice I can give you, because there's no point on making a decision today for something that might happen, you know, next month, or, you know, in 3 months, or, you know, whatever somebody else is predicting. The only real decision that you should be making is what you've got control of today. Okay, so if you're in a position where you can buy a home and you've got a budget, and there's a home out there that would suit you and is within your budget, then, you know, just follow the process, and, you know, make that happen. You're not doing it to short term, like, you know, unless you're buying property that you're going to be selling in, you know, 6 months or 12 months, then yeah, I can understand there's a little bit more risk involved there, and you need to be a lot more clearer on what the future holds, but there is a lot more risk involved there. But generally speaking, people buy property for, you know, a minimum of 5 years. So, you know, it's very likely, if you're buying the right property for the right price and the right location, you're going to get that capital growth. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about when I say you need to do your due diligence. You need to have that knowledge and you need to have that experience. Okay, so look, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you've got some value out of this. If you've got any questions, you know I'm always here, so be more than happy if you want to reach out. I'm here. And yeah, I will see you next time. Thank you so much. I'm Lisa Stafford, and I am your expert in real estate.